Have you ever wondered what truly happens inside a museum after the lights go out and the visitors are gone? These grand halls, often filled with centuries of history and priceless artifacts, seem peaceful and silent by day, but by night they transform into something entirely different. A world where the echoes of the past might just come alive. Guarding these treasures are the night watchmen, tasked with ensuring the safety of irreplaceable works of art. Their job might seem straightforward, but the stories they bring to light are anything but ordinary. Imagine walking through dimly lit corridors, surrounded by ancient relics and enigmatic paintings, when suddenly the silence is broken by unexplained footsteps or shadows moving where no one should be. Today, you're about to uncover 3 chilling, real-life tales from museum night guards who face the unexplainable. These are not just urban legends, but documented experiences that challenge our understanding of reality. From cursed paintings to artifacts with dark histories, these stories will take you into the heart of the eerie and unknown. So, brace yourself as we delve into a world where art and mystery intertwine, proving that some histories may never rest in peace. When the last visitors leave and the grand doors of a museum close, an entirely different atmosphere settles in. The bright, bustling spaces turn into vast, echoing chambers where every sound feels amplified and every shadow seems alive. For a night guard, this is the reality they step into. A world filled with silence, yet laden with the weight of centuries of history and mystery. Museums house more than just art and artifacts. They are keepers of stories, many of which are shrouded in legend. Some of the most famous institutions, such as the Louvre in Paris or the British Museum in London, are as known for their exhibits as they are for the whispered tales of paranormal activity. It's no surprise, given that many of the items in their collections have witnessed unimaginable events or come from cultures steeped in mysticism. Take, for instance, the legend of the haunted corridor in a European museum, where staff reportedly hear footsteps late at night, long after the halls are empty. Or the tale of an ancient mask rumoured to be cursed, causing mysterious malfunctions in security systems whenever it's moved. These anecdotes aren't just spooky stories. They are accounts from guards who often find themselves alone with these enigmatic objects. But why do these stories captivate us so deeply? Perhaps it's the idea that these relics, created to immortalize moments in time, might still carry echoes of their past. Maybe it's the unsettling thought that history preserved in these halls refuses to remain silent. As we step into these real-life accounts, remember, for these guards, what started as a routine shift became an encounter they'd never forget. Let's begin with the first tale, a chilling encounter with the unknown in one of history's most sacred corridors. It was a quiet evening at one of Europe's most iconic museums. The corridors, lined with artifacts from ancient civilizations, stretched endlessly in the dim light. For Thomas, a night guard with years of experience, this was just another routine shift, or so he thought. Thomas had walked the same route countless times before, checking the displays, ensuring the alarms were set, and scanning the security cameras. But something about this particular night felt off. The silence seemed heavier than usual, the shadows darker. As he turned down a hallway housing artifacts from ancient Egypt, he noticed it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing behind him. He froze, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. Visitors had left hours ago, and he was the only one assigned to this wing. Turning slowly, he aimed the beam of light down the corridor. Nothing. Just the glass cases displaying ornate jewelry, carved statues, and scrolls preserved for thousands of years. Deciding it was probably his imagination, Thomas continued his patrol, but the footsteps returned, louder this time, as though someone or something was following him. Panic crept in, and he quickened his pace, his boots clicking against the marble floor. Then he saw it, a shadow darting across the far end of the hallway, moving impossibly fast. Thomas radioed his colleagues stationed in the control room. "Do you see anything in Corridor B?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. There was a pause. Then his colleague replied, "Nothing. But wait. The camera just caught movement. A shadow, but there's no one there." Now thoroughly unsettled, Thomas decided to investigate. As he approached the end of the corridor, his flashlight flickered, then went out completely. He stood in total darkness, heart pounding, when he felt it. A sudden, icy chill, as if someone was standing inches away. Summoning his courage, he turned back toward the camera's blind spot, only to find an ancient statue of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the afterlife, staring back at him. Its eyes seemed to glint unnaturally in the dark. The footsteps stopped. The corridor fell silent. The next day, Thomas shared his experience with his supervisor, only to discover he wasn't the first to report strange occurrences in that hallway. Several guards had quit after witnessing similar phenomena, all centered around the artifacts from the same Egyptian tomb. Years later, the legend of Corridor B persisted. Staff avoided it whenever possible, and the museum refused to move the collection, claiming it was one of their most popular exhibits. Visitors remained unaware of the eerie stories tied to the ancient treasures they marveled at by day. To this day, Thomas swears by what he experienced that night. He left the museum shortly after, saying the shadows there were too heavy to bear. Was it just the power of suggestion? Or could it be that history itself had found a way to linger, bound to the artifacts that witnessed it? And so, Corridor B remains a mystery, an intersection between the living and the echoes of the past, where even the bravest guards think twice before treading after dark. At an art museum in the heart of a bustling city, the night watch was usually calm. Guards often joked that the paintings made for quiet company. But for Maria, a veteran night guard, one particular painting turned her quiet shift into a night she would never forget. The painting in question was an 18th century portrait of a young woman dressed in elaborate Victorian attire. Her piercing eyes seemed to follow anyone who walked past, a detail that had unsettled visitors for years. The painting had a strange history too. It was said to have been commissioned shortly before the woman in the portrait mysteriously disappeared. Some believed the artist, known for his obsession with his subjects, had painted more than her likeness, perhaps even her spirit. One night, while making her rounds, Maria noticed something odd. The room housing the portrait was colder than the rest of the museum, despite the central heating system running as usual. She paused for a moment, studying the painting. The woman's gaze seemed more intense than usual, almost alive. Shrugging off the eerie feeling, Maria continued her patrol. That's when she heard it, a faint, melodic humming. She froze, straining to locate the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from the room she had just left. Turning back, Maria cautiously approached the painting. The humming grew louder, unmistakably emanating from the portrait. Her heart raced as she leaned in closer, and suddenly, the humming stopped, replaced by a faint whisper. It was as though someone was murmuring just behind her. "Leave," the voice said softly. Maria spun around, but the room was empty. Her flashlight beam swept over the dark corners, revealing nothing out of place. Yet the voice lingered in her mind, sending chills down her spine. She hurried to the security desk, where her colleague monitored the cameras. "Check Gallery 3, Maria urged, her voice trembling. The footage showed nothing unusual, no movement, no sign of anyone else in the room. But just as Maria was about to breathe a sigh of relief, something caught her colleague's attention. Rewinding the tape, he pointed to a frame-by-frame sequence of the portrait. For a split second, the woman's expression had changed. Her lips, once closed, appeared slightly parted, as if mid-whisper. Shaken but determined to finish her shift, Maria avoided the gallery for the rest of the night. The following morning, she reported the incident to her supervisor, who dismissed it as a trick of the mind. But when Maria spoke to other guards, she discovered she wasn't alone. Several of them had heard humming or whispers near the portrait, though none had dared investigate further. The painting's unsettling reputation grew over time. Visitors began claiming they too felt watched or heard faint noises when near it. Some said they saw the woman's expression shift when viewed from different angles. Yet the museum refused to remove it, citing its historical significance and popularity with curious guests. Maria eventually requested a transfer to a different shift, unwilling to face the whispers again. To this day, the portrait remains on display, captivating and unnerving all who dare to linger before it. What truly lies within the layers of paint? Is it simply a masterpiece of haunting artistry? Or could it be a portal to something far more sinister? In a museum renowned for its collection of antique artifacts, one piece stood out not for its beauty, but for its chilling reputation. It was an ornate, floor-length mirror framed in intricately carved wood, said to have belonged to a 19th century aristocrat notorious for her involvement in occult practices. The mirror had been donated by her estate after her death under mysterious circumstances. Daniel, a seasoned night guard at the museum, had always dismissed the stories surrounding the mirror as folklore. But one winter night, during a particularly long and quiet shift, his skepticism was put to the test. As part of his routine, Daniel passed through the gallery where the mirror was displayed. Its surface reflected the dim light of the emergency exit signs, giving the room an eerie glow. Something about the mirror always unnerved him. It seemed to distort reflections ever so slightly, like a ripple across still water. That night, as Daniel turned to leave the gallery, he caught movement in the corner of his eye. Stopping in his tracks, he turned back toward the mirror. For a moment, it was just his own reflection staring back at him. But then he noticed something else. A shadowy figure standing behind him. Heart pounding, Daniel whipped around, but the gallery was empty. Turning back to the mirror, he saw the figure again, this time more defined. It was a woman dressed in 19th century attire, her expression cold and unyielding. She stood motionless, as if waiting for him to speak. Terrified, Daniel stepped back, only for the mirror to tremble slightly, as if something on the other side was pressing against it. He fled the gallery and reported the incident to his supervisor, who brushed it off as exhaustion. But the events of that night didn't end there. Later, while reviewing the security footage, Daniel and his colleague saw something impossible. The footage showed Daniel standing alone in the gallery, but the mirror reflected two figures, him and the woman. The video abruptly cut to static before resuming, showing Daniel fleeing the room. Determined to find answers, Daniel researched the mirror's history. He discovered that the aristocrat who owned it was rumored to have conducted seances and used the mirror as a gateway to communicate with spirits. Locals claimed the mirror was cursed, causing its owner to slowly lose her sanity before her untimely death. After Daniel's experience, other guards reported strange occurrences near the mirror. Some saw their reflections blink when they hadn't, while others claimed they felt watched, even when no one was around. The mirror's legend grew, with visitors flocking to the museum to catch a glimpse of its eerie aura. Despite its disturbing reputation, the museum refused to remove the mirror from display, citing its historical significance. For Daniel, however, the experience was enough to make him leave his job entirely. He later described the encounter as a moment that shattered his belief in the natural order of things. To this day, the mirror remains one of the museum's most infamous exhibits. Its surface continues to reflect not just the present, but perhaps glimpses of a haunted past, a past that refuses to be silenced. As the stories of the shadow in the corridor, the whispering portrait, and the eerie mirror reveal, museums are more than just places of culture and education. They are spaces where history is not only preserved, but sometimes refuses to remain silent. For the night guards who brave these dark halls, the line between reality and the inexplicable becomes increasingly blurred. What makes these tales so haunting isn't just the eerie events themselves, but the history that seems to linger within these objects. From ancient Egyptian artifacts to Victorian portraits and occult mirrors, each item carries the weight of the past, secrets, tragedies, and perhaps restless spirits. These stories remind us that history isn't confined to textbooks. It lives, breathes, and sometimes reaches out to those who dare to come too close. The experiences of Thomas, Maria, and Daniel serve as a chilling reminder that the past has a way of leaving its mark, sometimes in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Are these occurrences mere coincidences, tricks of the mind, or something more? As you ponder these mysteries, ask yourself, could history truly be alive in ways we've yet to understand? Perhaps the next time you visit a museum, you'll feel the watchful gaze of the past too.